Welcome to a new edition of Snapbook. This is the deep dive where we break down the really heavy sources you care about so you don't have to read them cover to cover.
Right. We take the dense concepts and snap them into, high-impact insights.
Exactly. And today's source material is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, which, by the way, was actually suggested by one of you listening right now. So keep those coming.
It's a great pick. Really shifts how you look at, well, pretty much everything.
Yeah, because it dives into this totally radical idea. Basically, it says that you are currently playing a game that has absolutely no finish line, but you're probably exhausting yourself trying to win it anyway.
And that exhaustion, it's entirely by design, because we've been taught the wrong rules for the reality we actually live in.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is this book really about, and why does it matter to you, the listener, right this second?
Well, at its core, this deep dive is about a fundamental structural difference between two entirely different types of games we play in life. It draws on this philosophy originally developed by a guy named Professor James P. Carse.
Right, the finite and infinite game theory.
Exactly. So first, you have your finite games. These are games like football, chess, poker.
Where the rules are obvious.
Right. The parameters are incredibly clear. The players are known. Everyone agrees on the rules. And, most importantly, there is an agreed-upon objective that officially ends the game.
Like a buzzer going off for a checkmate. You play a finite game to win.
Precisely. But then you have infinite games. And these are arenas like business or global politics or just life itself.
The messy stuff.
The really messy stuff. Because in an infinite game, players come and go. The rules are completely fluid. They're constantly changing. And the most critical distinction here, there is no finish line.
So you literally can't win.
You mathematically and philosophically cannot win. The goal of an infinite game isn't to win. It is simply to keep playing, to perpetuate the game.
And the reason this matters to you, whether you're, prepping for a corporate meeting or managing your own career, is because the default win-lose mindset is toxic here. If you apply finite rules to an infinite game, you get what the author calls finite exhaustion.
Yeah, it's that feeling of running on a hamster wheel that never stops.
Right. You hit this quarter's numbers, you celebrate for 5 minutes, and your only reward is higher numbers next quarter. It leads to burnout and eventual collapse.
Because when you misunderstand the game you're in, you inevitably make catastrophic strategic errors. Applying finite rules to an infinite game is just a recipe for disaster.
So how does a company actually lose then?
Well, in an infinite game, you don't lose in the traditional sense. A company doesn't lose, it goes bankrupt. A nation doesn't lose, it collapses.
Got it.
What's actually happening mechanically is that you merely run out of the will or the resources to keep playing. Your pieces just get removed from the board.
Okay, so what's actually new or different here? How do we play a game that never ends? Let's break it down into our key insights. Starting with insight number 1, the quagmire of the finite mindset.
And the source material grounds this in a really stark historical reality. It looks the Vietnam War, specifically the 1968 Tet Offensive.
Yeah, let's look at the mechanics of what happened there because it's fascinating. North Vietnam launches this massive surprise attack against U.S. and allied forces. We are talking over 85,000 troops attacking more than 125 different targets all at once.
Catching the American forces completely flat-footed.
Totally.
But here is where we have to look past that surface narrative. We have to examine the underlying structural reality of the conflict. Militarily, the United States repelled every single attack.
They decimated the attacking forces.
Right. When the major fighting concluded, America had lost fewer than 1,000 troops, while North Vietnam lost tens of thousands.
And if you zoom out to the entire decade of the war, the U.S. lost roughly 58,000 troops, compared to North Vietnam's 3 million.
It's a staggering difference. America won almost every major battle. They had vastly superior resources, overwhelming air supremacy, unmatched military technology.
By every single finite metric we use to measure a conflict, America was, quote-unquote, winning.
Yet they lost the war. They had to evacuate. So how do we explain that paradox?
Because they were playing two completely different games. The United States was fighting a finite war. They were looking for a win, a signed treaty, a clear endgame.
They wanted to say, we beat you, the game is over.
Exactly. But North Vietnam was playing an infinite game. They had been fighting for independence for 1,000 years against the Chinese, the Japanese, the
They're
French.
fighting for their very survival as a people.
Right. They weren't playing to win a specific battle. They were playing to keep the game alive. It's an asymmetry of objectives.
It's like one person is running a 100-meter dash and the other person is trying to survive in the wilderness. The sprinter crosses an imaginary finish line, stops, and is just exhausted, while the survivor just keeps walking.
And the U.S. just ran out of public will back home. The protests, the political pressure, they simply ran out of political capital to keep playing.
So they had to take their pieces off the board, and that exact same asymmetry plays out every single day in the modern business world.
Oh, absolutely. The book highlights this brilliant case study with Microsoft and Apple back in the mid-2000s.
Right, the Zune versus the iPod.
Yes, Microsoft launches the Zune.
Yeah.
This was their direct, aggressive answer to Apple's iPod. And Microsoft's leadership, specifically Steve Ballmer at the time, was highly vocal about their objective.
Their stated goal was just to beat Apple.
Which is such a finite goal.
Yeah.
I love the anecdote Simon Sinek shares about this. He's speaking at a Microsoft leadership summit, right? And for the entire event, all the executives are just obsessing over Apple.
Right, how to capture their market share, how to outmarket them.
Exactly. They even give Sinek a Zune as a thank you gift. And he admits it's actually a phenomenal piece of hardware. Beautifully designed, great interface.
It was a genuinely good product.
It was. But then, a few months later, he's speaking at an Apple summit. And 100% of the Apple executives spend 100% of their time talking about how to help teachers teach and students learn.
They aren't talking about Microsoft at all.
Not a single mention. So Sinek ends up in a taxi with a senior Apple executive, and he plays devil's advocate. He says, Microsoft gave me their new Zune, and honestly, it is so much better than your iPod Touch.
And the Apple executive's response is just the quintessential infinite mindset.
Right. What does he say?
He just smiles, looks out the window, and says, I have no doubt.
And that's it. End of conversation.
He was completely unfazed by the fact that a competitor had a temporarily superior product. He didn't get defensive.
He didn't start listing off processor speeds or battery life.
Because Apple wasn't playing a finite game to beat Microsoft. Let's look at the mechanics here. Microsoft built the Zune simply to beat Apple. That anchors your entire engineering strategy to whatever the other guy is doing.
It's totally reactive.
Exactly. But Apple was trying to outdo themselves. They were looking at a horizon Microsoft couldn't even see. They were already deep into developing the iPhone.
A product that would make the Zune and the iPod completely obsolete.
Right. If your only goal is to beat the competition, you lock yourself into this game of defensive whack-a-mole. It completely stifles true innovation.
Okay, I have to step in here and channel the listener for a second. Because this sounds great in a book, but is this always true?
How do you mean?
What happens when a company literally needs to hit a quarterly target just to keep the lights on? You can't just ignore the finite scoreboards in daily life, right? Like if my boss says hit this quota or you're fired, I can't just say I'm playing the infinite game.
No, you can't, and that's the most common pushback. But what's fascinating here is that the infinite mindset doesn't ignore finite goals.
It doesn't.
Not at all. It doesn't mean you stop caring about revenue or profits. It simply shifts how you contextualize those numbers. The infinite mindset makes finite metrics markers of progress toward a larger vision rather than the ultimate destination itself.
Okay, so it's like driving a car. Your dashboard has finite metric speed, fuel level, and you have to pay attention to them or you crash.
Exactly. If you run out of gas, the journey ends.
But the purpose of buying a car isn't just to buy gas. The destination is the point.
That's a perfect analogy. Or think about going to the gym. Getting healthy is an infinite pursuit. You are never done being healthy.
Right.
But you still use finite metrics to track progress. Your weight, your resting heart rate. But if you fixate purely on the metric like dropping 10 pounds fast, you might starve yourself. You hit the finite metric, but damage the infinite goal of your health.
That makes total sense. So when companies fixate on the quarterly metric as the ultimate goal, they start making destructive decisions.
They cut R&D, they do mass layoffs to inflate the stock price, they make today look good at the cost of tomorrow.
Which means you have to know where you are actually going. Which brings us to insight number 2, the power of a just cause.
Yes. To play the infinite game, every leader needs a just cause.
And a just cause isn't just a catchy marketing slogan, right? The book defines it really specifically. It's a clear, affirmative vision of a future state that does not yet exist.
A vision so compelling that people are willing to sacrifice their own finite interests to advance it.
Like their time, their sleep, their money.
Exactly. And the text outlines 5 strict tests for this. First, it must be affirmative and optimistic. It's for something, not against something. Second, it must be inclusive, an open invitation to anyone who wants to contribute.
Okay, what are the others?
Third, it must be service-oriented. This is the hardest one for corporations. The primary benefit of the cause must go to others, not the shareholders. Fourth, it has to be resilient. It has to survive technological shifts.
So it can't just be tied to one product line.
Oh, right. And finally, it must be idealistic. It has to be big and ultimately unachievable. You can work toward it forever, but never actually cross a finish line.
To really drive this home, the book shares this harrowing story about the siege of Leningrad. And we need to look at the psychology of sacrifice here. It's 1941. The Nazi army surrounds Leningrad for nearly 900 days.
1 million citizens die, mostly from starvation. The conditions were just unimaginable.
People are eating wallpaper paste, boiling leather belts. But right in the middle of the city, hidden away, is this enormous stash of edible food. Hundreds of thousands of seeds, potatoes, rice.
The life's work of a Russian botanist named Nikolai Vavilov.
Yeah. He wanted to end global hunger. He built the world's first global seed bank, like a backup drive for humanity's food supply.
And he gathered a team of scientists who shared this deeply idealistic, service-oriented vision.
Tragically, Vavilov himself was arrested by Stalin and died of malnutrition in prison. But his team was still in Leningrad, guarding this seed bank during the siege.
While slowly starving to death themselves.
Right. And they refused to eat the seeds. They even went out under artillery fire to plant potatoes, just to keep the genetic lines alive. 9 of those scientists starved to death, surrounded by edible food.
It is profoundly humbling. When a survivor was asked why they didn't just eat the collection, he said it was impossible to even consider. Because what was involved was the cause of all humanity.
They subordinated their finite existence to an infinite cause. That is the purest distillation of a just cause I've ever heard.
Exactly. Eating the seeds would have been a finite solution to a finite problem. It saves them for a month, but destroys the infinite timeline of humanity's food supply.
But let me push back again. Obviously, we aren't asking middle managers to starve to death in the break room.
No, definitely not.
So what happens when this whole concept fails in the corporate world? Because what if your company's just cause sounds exactly like empty corporate speak on a motivational poster? How do you tell the difference?
The litmus test is always the sacrifice and the service orientation. If a leader asks for your sacrifice, late nights, skipped vacations, but the primary beneficiary is just the company's stock price, that's a false cause.
Right. Human beings are highly attuned to that hypocrisy. You'll feel resentment building in your gut.
Exactly. Contrast a genuine cause like Sweet Green inspiring healthier communities by connecting people to real food with a false cause like being the best or achieving hypergrowth.
Being the best isn't a cause, it's just capitalism.
Right. Even JFK's moon landing wasn't a just cause, it was a massive, finite goal. Because once Neil Armstrong steps on the moon, the game is over. What do you do on Monday morning?
A just cause explains why some employees act like mercenaries, jumping ship for $5 more, while others act like zealots, working for the mission.
Which leads us directly into insight number 3, will versus resources and the chief vision officer.
Yes, every game requires 2 currencies, will and resources. Break down the mechanics of these 2 for us.
Resources are the tangible elements. Money, revenue streams, physical equipment, you can count it. Will is completely intangible. It's the internal energy of the organization.
Morale, inspiration, psychological safety.
Exactly. And both are essential. You can't run a logistics company on good vibes alone. You need trucks.
But you also can't sustain it on cash alone if everyone hates walking through the door.
Precisely. The split happens in a crisis. Finite leaders prioritize resources. Infinite leaders prioritize will.
Look at Walmart. Under CEO Mike Duke, it was all finite, prioritizing Wall Street market share. But the founder, Sam Walton, and a later CEO, Doug McMillon, they prioritized customers and employees first.
They cultivated the will, trusting the resources would fly out. Look at Victorinox, the Swiss Army knife guys.
Right, after 9/11.
Yeah, aviation rules changed overnight. You couldn't take small lives on planes. Their core market was devastated instantly.
A standard finite leader would have done mass layoffs to protect the balance sheet.
But Victorinox refused. They prioritized the will of their people over short-term resource protection. And because the employees felt secure, they rallied. They invented new product lines like travel gear and fragrances.
They kept the company alive without firing anyone. The Container Store did the exact same thing during the 2008 crash.
It's an organizational immune system response. Protect the people, and the people will innovate to protect the company.
And this brings up a provocative structural critique. The author says the title of CEO, Chief Executive Officer, is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, the word executive is hollow. It doesn't say what you're executing. He argues it should be CVO, Chief Vision Officer.
The primary job is not to manage the spreadsheets. It's to protect the vision.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Adam Smith believed capitalism should prioritize the consumer. But in the 70s, Milton Friedman said it was solely about shareholder profit.
Which is deeply finite. It treats a business like an extraction machine.
And makes companies fragile. Money is finite. You can't always control it. But will is an endlessly renewable energy source that leaders actually can control.
So how do we cultivate that will? That's insight number 4. Trusting teams over toxic performers.
Just because people work together doesn't mean they're a team. A true team requires psychological safety.
And vulnerability, which makes hard-charging corporate leaders roll their eyes. But the book uses the U.S. Navy SEALs to prove this.
Yeah.
The SEALs evaluate personnel on a matrix.
Right. On the y-axis, you have performance, technical skill, combat effectiveness. On the x-axis, you have trust, character off the battlefield. Do you have your teammates' backs?
Obviously, everyone wants the high-performance, high-trust person. But what happens when you have a high performer with low trust? A sniper on the battlefield, but a backstabber in the barracks.
The SEALs consider that person highly toxic. They would actually rather have a medium performer with high trust or even a low performer with high trust over the toxic high performer.
Let that sink in. The most elite military unit in the world explicitly prioritizes trust over performance.
Because of the neuroscience. A toxic high performer spikes cortisol levels in everyone else. And cortisol shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that does complex problem solving.
So the toxic guy literally lowers the collective intelligence of the unit. But in the corporate world, we do the exact opposite. We promote the toxic high performer because they hit their numbers.
Completely ignoring the invisible damage they do to the culture. Look at General Electric under Jack Welch versus Ford under Alan Mulally.
Oh man, Jack Welch was brutal. He used the Rankin-Yank system, firing the bottom 10% every single year. It created this cutthroat culture of sabotage.
Zero trust. People hoarded information and buried mistakes.
But then Alan Mulally takes over Ford when it's hemorrhaging billions. He starts these weekly business plan reviews. Executives have to bring colored charts. Green for good, yellow for caution, red for failing.
And at first, everyone brought green charts. The company is losing billions, but everyone claims their department is perfect.
Because they were terrified. Admitting a problem meant getting fired in the old culture. They were hiding the water while the submarine was sinking.
Until one executive, Mark Fields, brings a red chart. He admits his project is failing. The room goes dead silent.
They all thought he was going to be fired on the spot.
But Mulally starts clapping. He praised him for his transparency and asked how the team could help.
Until they felt safe enough to bring a red chart, the company couldn't be fixed.
Measuring performance is easy. Measuring trust is hard. But toxic high performers rot the organization from the inside out.
Okay, Rogan-style pushback here. Can we really use this in daily life? How do you get hyper-competitive alpha types in tech sales or finance to admit weakness without looking like they're failing?
It requires the leader to take the first risk. Trust isn't an instruction. You can't just mandate it. You have to build a circle of safety.
The leader has to model it first.
Exactly. Admit your own mistakes publicly. Reward others when they do the same, like Mulally clapping for the red chart. When vulnerability is rewarded with support instead of punishment, competitive drive shifts from hiding mistakes to solving problems collaboratively.
Which brings us to insight number 5, the gift of the worthy rival. Once your internal team is trusting each other, how do you look at the competition?
Well, in finite games, you have competitors you must beat. In infinite games, you have worthy rivals.
Right, and a worthy rival is just someone whose strengths reveal your own weaknesses. They push you to improve.
The crucial shift is you don't have to like them. You just need the humility to acknowledge they do certain things better than you.
Simon Sinek shares this super vulnerable story about his own rivalry with Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist.
Oh, this is a great example.
Yeah, Sinek admits he obsessively checked his book rankings against Grant's. If Sinek was higher, he felt gloaty. If Grant was higher, he felt angry and insecure. It was exhausting.
Because he viewed Grant as a competitor to be beaten.
Until they finally met at an event, and Sinek confessed these intense feelings. And Adam Grant just looked at them and said, "The insecurity is mutual."
It's a profound moment of clarity. Sinek realized his obsession was about his own insecurities. The rival just reflects your perceived inadequacies. By shifting from competitors to worthy rivals, they became allies advancing the same cause.
We saw this on a massive corporate level with Apple and IBM in 1981. IBM enters the personal computer market. Apple could have panicked and run attack ads.
But instead, Apple took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal saying, "Welcome, IBM. Seriously."
Such a flex.
They used IBM as a foil to clarify their own identity. IBM was the Navy, Apple was the pirates. They didn't want to destroy IBM, they used them to define what Apple stood for.
Contrast that with BlackBerry. When the iPhone came out, BlackBerry panicked. They abandoned their cause, tried to copy Apple's touchscreens with inferior tech, and fell from 20% market share to 1%.
Obsessing over beating the competition leads to cause blindness.
And you can apply this impartially to global politics. Look at the Cold War. The U.S. and the USSR were ultimate worthy rivals.
It focused American strategy, it drove unbelievable technological innovation, it forced political factions to cooperate.
But then the Soviet Union collapses, and the U.S. falsely declares it won the Cold War.
Which is impossible in an infinite game. The USSR just ran out of resources and will, but because the U.S. viewed it as a finite victory, they lost their worthy rival.
And hubris set in. They lost agility and humility. They missed the rise of decentralized threats and competing global economies like China. Staying comfortable is dangerous.
Which brings us perfectly to insight number 6. Existential flexibility.
This sounds intense. Break down what this actually means.
It is the capacity to initiate extreme disruption to your own successful business model in order to more effectively advance your just cause.
The key word is initiate. Yeah.
Yes, it's offensive, not reactive.
Yeah.
You're intentionally breaking your own highly profitable company because you found a better way to advance the cause.
The ultimate example of this is Walt Disney. In the 50s, his animation studio was wildly successful. Snow White, Cinderella, he was at the pinnacle.
But his just cause wasn't just making cartoons. It was bringing families together in an immersive world.
And he felt movies weren't fully doing that. So he made an existential flex. He risked everything. Sold property, borrowed against life insurance, licensed his name all to build a physical theme park, Disneyland.
Everyone thought he was mad. He was burning his own boats to take an island that didn't exist yet.
We saw a modern version of this with CVS Pharmacy. A few years ago, CVS was making $2 billion a year selling cigarettes, reliable recurring revenue.
But the stated mission was championing health and wellness. Selling a highly addictive product known to cause cancer was in direct contradiction to that cause.
So they made an existential flex. They permanently stopped selling cigarettes.
Sacrificing $2 billion.
Wall Street punished them. The stock took a massive hit. Pundits called it terrible business.
But the infinite-minded leaders at CVS understood the longer timeline. Taking a short-term finite hit aligned them with their just cause.
And look at the ripple effects. Employees were inspired. Health-conscious customers developed deeper brand loyalty.
And most importantly, massive health partners and hospitals suddenly wanted to work with them. Sacrificing that $2 billion positioned them for far more lucrative long-term healthcare partnerships.
It made the organization far more resilient, meaning staying on a profitable path might actually be your biggest risk. Look at Kodak. They invented the digital camera.
They held the patents.
But they made so much money selling film that they refused to flex. They hoarded the patents, stuck to the old model, and it led straight to bankruptcy.
If you don't have the flexibility to destroy your own outdated models, the market will do it for you. Which transitions into our final key insight, the courage to lead and resisting ethical fading.
It takes immense courage to make an existential flex, to ignore Wall Street and society telling you to just play the finite game.
Because without that courage, organizations succumb to ethical fading.
I find the mechanics of ethical fading terrifyingly relatable. It's the boiling frog syndrome. Small ethical transgressions become normalized.
Right. You exaggerate on a sales call, you fudge a timesheet, you tell yourself everyone else is doing it.
It's a slow fade until you wake up with a catastrophic corporate scandal.
To combat it, leaders must constantly recenter on the just cause. Look at Patagonia. Their leadership ran the company with an aggressively infinite mindset.
Running ads telling consumers not to buy their jackets if they didn't truly need them.
Prioritizing the planet over profit. And the paradox is their profits skyrocketed. They built such a strong culture that ethical fading simply couldn't take root.
We also saw this courage with Doug Parker at America West Airlines. He took over 10 days before September 11th. The industry collapsed.
He could have played the finite game/jobs, cut benefits.
But he had a conversation with a flight attendant, a single mother. It changed his perspective. He shifted from finite metrics to caring for his staff. That will carried the airline through an incredible infinite turnaround.
But this raises an important question, right? Is it realistic to ask middle managers to be courageous when their mortgage depends on a quota? Aren't they trapped in a finite game?
Exactly. You can't tell your landlord you're paying rent with an infinite mindset.
The system is deeply flawed. Wall Street rewards finite behavior, but every manager controls the circle of safety for the people directly below them.
So you act as an umbrella.
Yes. You shield your team from the toxic boss above you. You foster trust in your department. You can be an infinite leader in a finite system for the people in your immediate charge.
You control the weather for your team. That is a deeply empowering thought. All right, we've covered massive ground today. From the Vietnam War to Apple, the Leningrad Seed Bank, Navy SEALs, Walt Disney, CVS. It's time for our Snap Action.
What's the challenge for this week?
Here is the one thing we challenge you to try this week. Identify one worthy rival in your life or career, someone whose success makes you secretly envious or insecure. Instead of trying to beat them, write down one specific thing they do better than you, just one thing, and figure out how you can learn from it to improve your own process. Snap this into your routine and watch what happens to your stress levels when you start learning instead of competing.
That's a great challenge. But before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with one final mind-expanding thought. Think about the ultimate infinite game, our own lives.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Wendy Mogul tells a story of a father bragging that his newborn baby, quote unquote, won their APGAR score at the hospital.
The basic health breathing test.
Yes, we're so conditioned to win that we try to win at being born. But none of us gets out of this alive, and no one is declared the winner of life. Your tombstone won't list your bank balance. It will list who you served. How does realizing you are a finite player in the infinite game of life change what you'll do tomorrow?
Wow, that absolutely puts the scoreboard in perspective. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the infinite game. Got a source, an article, or a book you want us to break down next?
We want to hear them.
Drop your suggestions at snapbook.fm or tag the show on social at snapbookpod. And if you like this deep dive, share with someone who's obsessing over the score but forgetting why they started playing. Until next time, snap in, level up.